two friends taking pictures of the rising full moon on a summer night.
Two teenage kids doing what teenage kids do.
When a stranger with a gun and a death wish changed everything.
It was violent, it was senseless, and I will never understand it, I will never accept it.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and unfortunately, we're all too familiar with stories about how violence shatters lives. But what we rarely see is how they are rebuilt. In a new podcast, The Letter, we relive tragedy, but only so we can hear the rest of the story. The struggle to reclaim lives, the realities of grief, and the possibilities of forgiveness.
I believe in miracles. Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery. It's a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery. And it's brought to you by useonlyasdirected.org. They've got a three-part solution: speak out, opt out, and throw out. And Dr. Matt, a lot of stories and guests have come to us from people who got into their addiction through a legal prescription. And so we find it very valuable for them to partner up with us and help continue sharing stories of those in recovery and giving people hope. Now, Dr. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm great.
All right, we've got a guest today, Lorie Warburton. She's got an exciting and wonderful, hopeful story to share with us. But before we get to that, I want to go back to toilet talk.
Oh, yeah?
Because we are in the COVID-19 pandemic, and you said you went to your garage and you found a gold mine.
I did. I was looking for some other stuff.
What were you looking for?
I was, what was I? I don't remember. I was cleaning up mostly, I think, is what I was doing. And as I moved some of the camping gear, there was a 3-pack of the Clorox wipes from Costco, untouched, unopened. I mean, it was, amazing.
Did you feel like Indiana Jones?
It was like, oh,
right?
Yeah, right. And the light shone down, and there it was. And then I was like, could it get better than that?
Could it?
No, I didn't think so. But then as I was moving some camping gear, I found a bunch of the small little backpacking size of hand sanitizer.
Wow.
In there. So we have a bunch of those now.
But let's get to the real topic that you were talking about earlier, and that was toilet talk.
The toilet paper talk.
So you said you went to the Costco there in Bountiful.
Yeah.
And you got a big pack.
I was surprised. They had a ton. They had a bunch of it, but they just let you buy one at a time. Yeah.
But you have a certain bathroom routine.
Well, yeah, I think everybody has a routine, whether they're willing to talk about it or not.
Are you willing to talk about it?
Well, sure.
So you say.
Sure. I have expert plumber advice saying that this is okay, that my routine's okay.
Because the flushable wipes, I heard, are not good for the system.
Well, but they're flushable, and it says so on the package.
Okay.
So here's the thing. You got to do it the right way, though. Now, some people get out of control with the flushable wipes.
That's all they use.
That's all they use because it's nice. It's not. Once you've used, if somebody's laughing at this and they've never used a flushable wipe, try one and then get back to me, okay? But you start with the TP, the regular toilet paper, just like you always did growing up. You use the toilet paper, right? And, depending on the day, you might need an extra flush in there.
Yeah, I got
right?
you.
But then when you're all finished, right before you're done, you finish up with just one flushable wipe.
Okay.
And then you'll feel like $1,000,000, I promise. You'll just skip right out of the bathroom feeling clean and great. And one flushable wipe is okay.
Well, the hippie producer brought a good point to that conversation. Yeah. He said, why not just a bidet?
A bidet sounds great. Yeah. I have a friend who has a bidet.
I heard it's a party for your butt.
And it's got lights and music.
That might be a little much.
That go with it. I don't know where you even get these anymore, but I think his was made in China.
And this episode's not brought to you by Costco, but I heard you can
bidets.
Or I heard you can get a bidet.
At Costco. Oh, I'm sure you can.
Yeah.
They have the sort of like the cheater ones. You can install them yourself, and they come from the water main, and it just kind of hooks onto your toilet already. And I think a lot of people are buying those. I've heard that those are kind of back-ordered right now.
It's like a play school, my first bidet.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to get one of the real ones, where you have to have a pro install it and
Do you have a friend?
Everything. I do. I have a friend who's a plumber. He'd do a great job.
All right.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Brian.
Brian the plumber.
Yeah.
specializes in bidets.
Yeah, he'd do a great job.
All right, so we're going to get off of bidet talk. We're going to get back to the topic at hand, and that is recovery. And our guest today, Lorie Warburton, she reached out to me on Facebook. She said she's got a story to tell. And the thing that really kind of piqued my interest was that you said in this time that we're going through right now, COVID-19, that domestic violence is, increasing and substance abuse is increasing, and it made you want to reach out to me. Why did it make you reach out to me?
Absolutely. Well, because I've lived an entire life of abuse, and it started, if you don't mind me saying so.
No, let's get started.
Perfect. Well, it started when I was about 5 years old, and at the time we were living in Huntington Beach, and things looked pretty normal to everybody else. On the outside, healthy family. I had 4 brothers and me, and we had both parents, and we were also living under the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's what was in our household at the time. And everything seemed on the up and up. But unfortunately, unfortunate incidences were happening behind the closed doors. It was the priesthood holder in the home, my father, who was my perpetrator. So when this started, it was kind of, one of those things where you're a normal 5-year-old little girl, but daddy comes in the door and you never know what's going to happen. The first time it took place, he told me that I wasn't to tell anyone, that very bad things were going to happen, and that my mother would not only be very sad, but she would be mad at me. And so I was never to tell.
Whoa, at 5 years old.
Right. And so I had a choice at that time, and one thing about this is I was given some God-given talents in the beginning, and one of that was a creative mind, also the ability to forgive and to unconditionally love people, and I'm a fighter. So I was given a fighting spirit from the beginning. So I just told myself I was never going to tell. And so I buried that as far back as I could into the back of my mind, and I just told myself, you can never, ever, ever tell.
So the abuse started at 5, and how long did it continue for?
So that was until I was about 10. But let me back up a little bit, because I think it's important to also mention that right away I made up a fictional character to help me get through what was happening to me. And what I made up was a polar bear, a big white polar bear. And he was constantly trying to get into the house. I would tell that. And as I progressed in the story each time, it would get more and more creative and more scary, I guess, for me as a 5-year-old. But another thing, too, once my dad would leave my room and I'd try to go to sleep, what would happen is within about a 2-hour time frame, I would have an asthma attack. So this asthma attack was stress-induced. And, of course, my mother would then come into the room because I can't breathe. And, I mean, at this point, I'm having to be taken to the hospital constantly because of this. And, of course, I can't tell. I won't tell the doctor. And so they think I'm allergic to something and have no idea. So each time this happened, I couldn't tell her that it was the polar bear until after, but that's what I used to help me get through those difficult moments.
Now, Dr. Matt, as a child psychologist, does that seem par for the course? Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I appreciate you being willing to share such a sensitive and personal story. There are, unfortunately, so many people who have gone through something very similar to what you're sharing. And your reaction to it is the type of reaction that's very common for a little person to do. You know, a lot of dissociation with creating alternate personalities and storylines and things that give you a sense of control, but also the psychosomatic response to it. Having an asthma attack, stress-induced asthma, provided an ability to be taken care of, you know. And so as an adult, we might be much more likely to feel equal with the perpetrator and stand up for ourselves, although we know that also doesn't happen many times. But a child doesn't feel equal. There's a power differential, and unfortunately your father used a very damaging but common technique, which is fear. He made you feel afraid to tell and threatened awful things that would happen, primarily the loss of the relationship with your mother. And so having a stress-induced asthma attack happen allowed your mother to come in and comfort and take care of you in a way that you still didn't have to tell. And so that certainly wasn't a conscious decision by a child. A child wouldn't be able to consciously induce an asthma attack, but having psychosomatic responses under extreme periods of stress are very common and allowed you to have that connection and support and help from your mother, even though it wasn't directly related. She didn't know exactly what was happening, and allowed you to be taken out of the home and to the doctors and get some help and support, which wasn't enough to stop what was happening, but it was something that a child in your small mind, it was a way to control the situation.
Absolutely. And I'm just really glad that I wasn't like a lot of normal girls. I didn't like Barbie dolls or anything like that. I was constantly thinking outside of the box. So I wanted to write plays. I spent a lot of time in high heels with my mom, putting on makeup and those kind of things. And I actually did end up writing plays. And I would charge people to come to our garage in Huntington Beach, California. And I'd get other kids involved too, of course. We put on a play and everyone would come and watch us. And while all this was still going on in my life, of course, at the time. And so, and also my singing, when I started as a young girl singing, and that carried me through so much of my life as well.
Now, you said the abuse happened from 5 until 10.
Correct.
And then what happened?
Okay, well, at 10, my dad actually started having an affair with another woman, and this process, we were transitioning, moving to Utah. And so we were still in California. He was going to Utah to find our home. He worked for the JCPenney company, and that's why we were moving to Utah. So anyway, in that meantime, he had met someone and was having this affair. And when that happened, the abuse stopped with me. Now, I'm just remembering things. I started having flashbacks to remind me of these things that were happening in my 20s and 30s. So I buried it all throughout my life. I just went on with my life, okay? But there were certain times where I was reminded of that. But that abuse with him didn't stop, okay? So the abuse in my life continued. And the reason I'm making mention of this is because I want everybody to know that it's important that if you are in a situation, there's people who are starting off right now that are in a situation where they know what's going on, they're afraid to tell, they're embarrassed to tell. You should tell as soon as you know. Don't wait, because every single step of the way after that affected my life and my life choices, things like that I feel could have been avoided if I was brave enough to tell,
But that seems easier said than done for somebody
Right.
of that mind frame and that age.
Right. So a pre-adolescent child, you repressed and, stuffed down those thoughts and feelings, tried to get rid of those memories, and that's common for a child to do. There was probably a fair amount of dissociation, meaning not feeling that you were there in your mind when it was happening, and that sort of stress and pressure on a child, I would say, it's great, of course, if a child will tell. That's the best thing, because that'll put a stop to it. Most kids don't, and we would never blame them for not telling, because they don't really have the capacity. When I used the term a minute ago, power differential, I mean, this was your father, somebody that you were supposed to respect and love, and on many levels you probably did. And then he was also perpetrating against you, so he was also somebody who was hurting you. And that sort of dichotomy in a child's mind is difficult if not impossible, to reconcile. Some children do say something. Many children do more like what you did, which is find other outlets. And you became, it sounds like, very creative and into the idea of alternate realities, right? You were writing plays and singing and performing. And so becoming someone else was what was your way of dealing with this. I'm curious, though, as you said, at 10 years old, the abuse with your father stopped. But then it sounds like, just to clarify, you found yourself in other abusive relationships with other people? Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I married my first husband when I was 17 years old, my kids' father. And we ran away and got married. My mom was on her second marriage, and he was kind of abusive to us and to her a little bit as well. And so me and my boyfriend decided that we were going to run away.
How old was he at the time?
And he was 18. And so we just ran away and to Elko, Nevada, and decided to do that. But anyway, I never really was interested in homemaking stuff. So I kind of was thrown out there, thought I knew what I was doing. And I found myself making my first homemade meal, which was macaroni and cheese. And I didn't know how to do it, and I hardly had any dishes or pots and pans or anything. So I took 2 small frying pans and was boiling the noodles in there. And then I put everything together, put the ingredients in, and he wasn't home yet. So I put it in this Pyrex dish and put it in the oven. And when he got home, I was so excited that I at least made something. I went to take that out with a hot pad, and the hot pad had a little hole in it, and the dish dropped and shattered into a million pieces. Well, I was, of course, mortified, but that's when I got my first shove into the wall. I can't say the words on the radio station that he said to me, but pretty much, that I'm stupid and all of these kind of things. And then that's when my first beating happened, when I was 17 years old. Now, I kind of thought this was normal. I didn't know. But as we progressed, the situation got even worse and more frequent and everything like that. And I'm talking about holes punching in walls, kids, once they were born, being locked behind closed doors with him in the room with them. And he's screaming, and I'll never see the kids again. He rips the phones out, so I can't call anybody. If I were to drive anywhere in a snowstorm, and I didn't know where to go, if I'd only been there one time, he would hit me all the way there if I had to ask where to turn. The reason I'm driving is because he was drinking. And I drank, too, throughout my life. It started when I was about 14. That was
your first drink?
Mm-hmm, that was my first drink when I was 14. So that's going back just a little bit. But I think it's important also to, since how we're talking about recovery and all these things, abuse gets worse with alcohol. It always has. And at 14, when I took my first drink, it was interesting because the girlfriend that I had at the time said, well, my parents said you can't sleep over unless you have a couple beers. And I am going, wow, okay. Now, they were alcoholic, but I didn't know that. I didn't even know what that was. But the thing was, they had a recording studio down in their basement to sing with. They had the guitars, the music, everything. And so her and I were going to compete against each other. And so I went and told my mother that I wanted to have this sleepover, and she said, oh, yeah, that's fine. I didn't tell her about the beer or anything because I thought I could get out of it once I got there, but that wasn't the case.
The parents really wanted you to drink?
Mm-hmm. They wanted me to drink. At 14? Yes, at 14 years old. So I had my first beer. I had to have that or I couldn't sing, and so I caved in, and that's what I did. And the first beer, I remember, I had 2, and I remember it immediately taking away that I've dealt with anxiety my whole life, not anymore, but while all this was going on, all this chaos, I had it my entire life. And that actually took that away for just a little bit. That took the fear away, the anxiety feeling away. And plus, I felt like I sang the best I've ever sang before. And I actually won, that night, if you want to call it that. But that's...
Because most people would think you lost.
Right,
You know
exactly.
what I mean? In hindsight, when you're looking back as an adult.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think they wanted you to drink with them?
Just because they had an unhealthy household, and that's what they did.
They did, huh?
And they
Okay.
wanted to socialize and have it be a party, and that's what it ended up being.
Okay. Sometimes people also feel judged by those who aren't drinking with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's odd to include a 14-year-old in that, but maybe that was part of it as well.
You're listening to Project Recovery. It's a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, recovery. We're listening to Lorie Warburton's story. We'll get more of that in just a few seconds.
Two years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
She was tear-gassed and beaten.
Images of thousands desperate to escape Taliban oppression filled our news feeds. More than 80,000 Afghans made it to America. But the story didn't end there.
It was very cold. There was no power, no heat.
Who would help our newest neighbors? I'm Andrea Smartin. In Stranger Becomes Neighbor, you'll hear the stories of some remarkable refugees who left their homes and their dreams behind, only to start over from zero.
Their only possession was 3 blankets.
And you'll meet Americans who stepped up to help them.
You want me to come when you deliver your baby.
What can one person do in the face of an international disaster decades in the making? That's Stranger Becomes Neighbor. Find us at kslpodcast.com. Follow us on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you listen.
Dr. Matt, you talk about how a lot of people feel like they're judged when they're doing something that somebody else isn't doing. And I know in my active addiction, I was guilty as anybody else, because I wanted everybody to drink as much as I did, so my drinking didn't seem...
so it would sort of justify or normalize.
I mean, there would be times I'd sit around and go, how did we get so drunk? And people were like, you. Who ordered these shots? You.
Yeah.
And I would do that because I was like, hey, if they're doing it with me, then I don't have a problem.
Yeah. But it's a way to justify.
But they walked away from it. So you said you started drinking at 14, Lorie, and you kind of drank for the most of your life?
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
Did that first drink lead to regular drinking as a teenager?
No. It was just periodic at that point in time. But then, when I got married, he also drank. Mm-hmm. And then our friends drank and all of that. And I was professionally singing and doing some things, and that seemed to calm my nerves down. But I really never let it overpower me at those times. I think... a lot of the time I was afraid because I didn't know what was going to happen, that kind of thing. But as I remember, at that time in my life, at 17, when we were married and that, I don't remember keeping a lot of alcohol in the house. It would more be like, and go out to do type of a thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was helpful to me because, I am one who, if I have something to drink, I'll want to drink the whole thing, just because that's what we do, right?
So in your early 20s, drinking was more of a social thing, but your husband was abusive when he drank. Mm-hmm. And so where does the story go from here?
Okay, so, I want to make mention as well that the way that my life ended, or not ended, but the way that marriage ended at that point was... my husband had passed out on the couch, and I had my 2 children with me, of course, and I took one out to the car, and then I went and I got the other one and I put him out in the car, and then I went in to just grab my personal belongings, just a little bit of things. I didn't put a whole bunch of stuff in the car to survive with.
You had decided you were leaving.
I decided I was leaving.
At what age were you then?
And I was, I would say I was 19, about 19 at the time. So, sorry. I'm trying to, timelines are kind of fuzzy to me on these types of things.
So you're 19, you've been in a 2-year abusive marriage, you've got 2 kids, you decide, I'm done, I'm out, and you load your kids in the car.
Actually, I was 20 because now my kids' ages are coming into mine, so I apologize for that. Yes, so I got them in the car, and as I was getting my personal belongings and leaving, the door shut, and he heard me. So, of course, he woke up and he ran outside and he started kicking the car in as I'm trying to fasten things down and everybody, in, and drove away. Now, from that point, because I don't want to drag it on and on, but my ex-husband, my kids' father, tried to commit suicide. Now, he exhausted himself in the garage, and consequently, and he was in a coma for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and consequently, he has the mentality of about a 12-year-old. So this is my kids' father. He still comes to our family things. As a matter of fact, he lives across the street from one of my boys right now. And my other son, who is a highway patrolman, and he's just a saint for our family. But anyway, he's taking care of his finances. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because that was my choice and decision. I made that choice. And consequently, now my boys are kind of having to take care of, something that I feel bad about. Now, he did try to commit suicide one other time. He actually took a gun and put it up this way, but it went off to the side. And actually, one side of his face was blown completely off, and he's dismembered there. But, through some surgeries and stuff, he looks better. But this is stuff that I'm going through in my life, that my family's going through as well. So I want people to know that it doesn't just stop, at abuse. It can just keep going on and on with other tragedies. So that's what happened with that.
Now, just to clarify, so which suicide attempt happened first? The gun?
No.
Okay, so he tried to asphyxiate himself in the garage with the exhaust from the garage, from the car. And then that created a coma and consequently brain damage.
Right.
So his mentality is regressed to about, a preteen. Mm-hmm. And then after that, he attempted to shoot himself, but survived.
Yes, and that was several years later. Still.
So are you saying at this point, and how many years approximately is that ago that second suicide attempt happened? How many years in the past?
I'm going to say at least, I want to say 7 years. No, even more than that.
So we're at least 10 years,
10 years,
a decade ago.
Yeah.
And you're still feeling guilty or responsible for this?
Oh, no, I don't feel guilty, and I don't feel responsible for any of that in any way. I just want to bring it up because so many things can happen, with drinking and all this, the kind of thing that happens.
Well, you bring up drinking. Let's get back to when you get the kids in the car, you drive away, and your husband attempts suicide, not once but twice. Throughout this, are you still drinking?
No, not at that point. No, I wasn't drinking until, after I went to my mom's to stay. Then occasionally, yes, we'd go out and have some drinks. I stayed with her for a while. But yes, I continued to drink throughout my life. And I had several other relationships that were also very abusive. Now, abusive can look different in all kinds of ways, right? What I want to mention is the second time I got married, I was married 10 years. Now, he also drank, and I did as well. There was a point in time where when my son was about 5 years old, same age as me, He was having a problem wetting the bed, and I took him to the doctor, and they told me that his bladder didn't grow right. And so he was on medication, and consequently, he actually wet the bed until he was about 8. But at 5 years old, I was supposed to admit that my son was a failure at 5. Now, if I didn't do that, I was getting smothered, hit, choked, until I would admit that.
To your husband?
Exactly, to my husband. Now, I'm bringing this up because I had a hard time, because I finally admitted it, because I felt like I wasn't going to be able to live at a certain point in time. Now, this isn't the only thing that's happened, okay, but I remember this, and the reason it's so strong in my mind is because I have felt guilty about that my entire life until I stopped drinking,
You felt guilty about admitting your son was a failure?
Absolutely. Oh, it hurts me, to this day. All of us are still healing from all the decisions and choices I made. So I didn't just stop there. I mean, I had, by the time I was done, I had 6 relationships, and then I came into where I was told that my mother, she was acting weird for a while. Now, let me just reiterate here just a little bit. So my mom had been married 3 times. The 3rd time was a charm. I have a wonderful stepfather who is in my life. It's the most normalcy I've ever had. And he's still in my life today, even though my mother has passed away. The reason I want to bring her passing up is because there's a few significant things. I was able to tell her about what happened with my father. We were able to have a discussion. And she also told me when I was 7, I came to her and told her that in a dream my dad was inappropriately touching me. Now, she remembered that, and we were able to have a discussion about it. But again, everything was coming in a dream. I was just trying to tell her. Anyway, one day I was sitting at work. Me and my mother had a beautiful relationship. She was my very best friend, but I was sitting at work and I got a phone call that my mother had a stage 4 brain tumor and only had 3 months to live. Now, when that happened, this is where I was devastated, of course. And also, I ended up being her caretaker along with my stepfather. And when I say that, I mean I literally went over there, moved in, and was going to work and taking care of her. When she passed away, I thought I was ready for that, and I just wasn't, but what do you do? When she was a corpse, she wanted me to put her makeup on her and do her hair. I did all of that. I was strong enough to go through all of these things. I'm just kind of fast forwarding as we go. Mm-hmm. Anyway, after she died, that's when my alcohol got out of control. I was the only one in my family who was single. I actually stayed single for about 7 years in that time frame, because after she was gone, I basically lost my sense of everything. I had a hole this big inside of me that I couldn't fill up with anything good. And so I would sit in my home, in my apartment, and just lock myself up in there. I stopped talking to family, friends, everything like that. I would get the largest jug of vodka that I could have, and that's where my depression, my downhill spiral started taking effect, was in that time.
You're listening to Project Recovery. We're listening to Lorie Warburton as she shares her story. This is just the first half of her story. Make sure you tune into part 2 to find out what she's doing now and how she came out of this.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.